And welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you guys so much for being with us tonight. As always, we appreciate it. If you have not subscribed to WDWNT TV, please do so. But of course, please give this video a like as it helps people to find us. Tonight, we're going in a different direction, folks. I have a friend. Actually, it's my bestie. This is Blair from iHeartRadio. How are you, Blair?
I'm good. How are you, bestie?
I am so good. Thank you so much for being with me tonight and talking about this movie. We are going to be talking about Pixar's Luca. And when I reached out to you, you were like, first of all, Rob, why are you reaching out to me? We have that agreement that you're not supposed to do that. And then secondly, I just, said to you, hey, do you want to watch Luca? And you're like, sure, I've never watched it before, which I'm excited about because I want to get your firsthand opinions about this movie. So just before we get into this, you need to know the rules. We're going to talk about it, and at the very end, you're going to give your final, would you recommend this? So don't give away too much as we go along, but just in watching this movie, have you had a lot of experience with Pixar movies in general?
I have. I am a big Pixar fan. I grew up watching Pixar. I had not seen this one. There's a handful I haven't seen, but for the most part, I'm pretty big on Pixar. I've seen the majority of them.
You're not one of those people that when somebody says Pixar, you say, "Oh, I love Shrek." You're not one of those people, right? Because again,
I mean, I do love Shrek,
but you know it's not a Pixar movie.
I do know. I am aware of that.
That was very close, Blair. You were cutting it close. So we looked at Luca, and one of the things that's interesting about Luca is that it is a movie that went straight to Disney Plus during COVID. That was interesting. We went straight to Disney Plus during COVID. So did Soul, and so did Turning Red. So there were 3 movies in a row that all went straight to Disney Plus. I'm just going to ask you your opinion as an outsider. Do you think that that is a bad sign when movies go straight to streaming, or do you think that it was on purpose? They were trying to get people onto the streaming platform.
I think it probably was on purpose because, it was around that time that people were kind of starting to flock in that direction. I feel like it probably was a strategic move.
Final answer?
Final answer is yes.
So this was Pixar's 24th movie. They've done 26 movies in 27 years. And I started thinking about the fact that Disney has just done their 60th with Encanto. The 61st Strange World's coming up this year. And that's in 85 years. So really they're kind of churning out a whole bunch of movies at a really fast pace, basically one a year. Have you seen any of the Pixar movies that you're like, ooh, Pixar, why did you do that one?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thanks. That's why I'm here.
I can't think of any Pixar movies that I dislike. Secret Life of Pets Pixar?
Good night, everybody. I can't believe you would know. See,
I didn't even say anything about it yet.
No, I'm just saying it wasn't a Pixar movie.
No, okay. Well, then that's why I asked.
Usually on this show I will do trivia, but maybe instead I should do Pixar movie or not Pixar movie with you. That would be a fun game, wouldn't it?
Maybe you should, actually. I'm not sure how well I would do.
Okay. So in watching this movie, I've watched this a few times. My daughter loves this movie. And so I've watched it a few times, but as, again, an outsider, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. How is this not The Little Mermaid?
Well, they're not mermaids. They're sea monsters.
I'm just saying, it's basically The Little Mermaid.
They don't sing. There's no prince. It's not even close. They have, legs. Her whole thing was that she wanted legs. They already have legs. They have, fish legs. It's not even, really a tail.
He wants to be where the people are. He wants to see him dancing. So he's looking up at the outside world, and he wants to be a part of it. He comes out of the water, and he's human, and he's still trying to grapple with that whole legitimately fish out of water. What's this weird dingle hopper thing? He's got his best friend Scuttle, aka Alberto, who is just he's
leave him alone.
Do what?
Leave him alone.
Leave Alberto alone. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of like Scuttle, right? Because in The Little Mermaid, Scuttle is like, oh, this is a snarfblat, and this is what this is used for. And Alberto's like, oh, those are anchovies up in the sky.
That's fair. There's some parallels, but I don't recall any dancing.
Okay. No, no, there really wasn't any dancing. I'm really just trying to get a rise out of you on that one because I feel like though there are some similarities to it. It is definitely a unique and original story, but it does have some throws to things like that. That he his parents don't want him up on the surface, and so he decides to run away. There are a few differences in there, but there's an interesting dynamic with Alberto and Luca, and I always forget her name. It's
Julia.
Julia. Yeah, because it's spelled with a G, but yeah. So it's Julia, Luca, and Alberto, and there's an interesting dynamic with them because there's not a lot of movies that are just like friends that hang out.
Hmm. I was pleased that there wasn't really like a love interest happening. Not really.
Put a pin in that. I want to ask you a
Okay.
question about. I want to ask you a question about that at the end. When the movie starts out, they start out that there are these men in a boat, and they're talking about sea monsters, and then there's something lurking in the water. And I think when they advertised this movie, you really didn't know necessarily what it was at first, and the closer they got to release, the more they started showing like the sea monster aspect of the kids, that they're standing in water and they're above the water they're normal kids, and below you can see the sea monster thing. So they started hinting around at that, but the early trailers were just basically the boys playing around. But as this movie starts, you see these fishermen in a boat, and there's this like creepy sea monster thing happening there, and then they go down below the sea, and now we meet Luca, and he's like a farmer, and in their we see their world, and this is that kind of flip flop. This is kind of like a look into our society, kind of, that they now see the land people as monsters, whereas the people on land see them as monsters as well. So I feel like that has some connotations to our world today. Would you agree to that? Or am I going too deep for a Pixar movie?
I would say you're hitting the nail on the head. I feel like that's like the whole moral of the story, right? You people fear what they do not understand.
Okay.
I think you're on the
Um,
right.
oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So then, once we meet Luca, he goes up to the surface, and the surface is forbidden, and he meets Alberto. Actually, Alberto kind of lures him to the surface, right? Because he shows up in this diving outfit, and he doesn't know who this is, and Alberto's like, I'm just one of you, and then they go up to the surface, and that's when he learns at first that he can get out of the ocean, and when he does, he immediately turns into a human, or at least appears to be a human. So once that happens and he appears to be a human, no sea witch necessary. So maybe that is the difference between The Little Mermaid and this movie. No sea witch necessary. So once that happens, and they get up there, it really kind of, it all kind of works out that he is now, he's now human. But once he's on land, he picks it up like this. I mean, did that bother you at all, that like he could just pick up walking in like 18 seconds?
I questioned that. More than anything, I questioned the fact that they speak the exact same language as the people on shore, which, by the way, is like mostly English and like a little bit of Italian. So yeah, I mean, he did pick it up pretty quickly. I also thought it was interesting, not to get ahead of myself, but that he had no idea that this was going to happen to him, and that's just like not a thing that sea monsters even are aware is a possibility. And suddenly he can totally walk around and run around and jump and use a fork.
Okay, so in that same vein, there's a lot of Italian and English mixed up here. I don't know why. Like, normally they may have an Italian accent but speak English so that we understand them, or there may be some caveat that they explain why they're speaking English when they're supposed to be Italian, but they don't seem to do that. They just seem to go back and forth within the same sentences. I know that that's a thing that can happen in Spanish. I'd never have heard that in Italian, though, especially because this movie is supposed to take place in the 1950s.
Yeah, I had not either. I kind of liked it. I like that they peppered some in because, I mean, obviously they're not going to write the whole movie in Italian. But, like, you know, you watch, like, Beauty and the Beast, which is supposed to be set in France, and they don't speak any French. And it's like, why are these people speaking English? I enjoyed the bits of Italian peppered in.
Do you speak Italian?
No, not at all.
Okay. So one of the things that usually makes a Pixar movie is I feel like there's always, and they're talking a little bit about it in the chat here, is that there's always a sad point, like this, like just drastic sadness. If you think about Ellie passing away in Up, and sorry for the spoiler if you've never seen Up, but you know, or having to like send Boo back in Monsters, or when Andy leaves in Toy Story, there's a lot of really super sad moments in Pixar movies. I don't know that I felt like we had that in this movie.
I mean, when Alberto reveals himself for the first time, and you know, Luca kind of rejects him and pretends like he doesn't know what's going on, and he rushes away. I feel like that was like the sad moment, but I would agree because I mean, it was definitely sad, but like the kids like sort of had it coming a little bit too, because I mean, he was kind of like screwing up the whole situation they had going on there. So I think that maybe took the edge off of the sadness a little bit,
but it wasn't super sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see Onward?
Actually, no, I have not seen Onward.
Cool. We'll table that for another time. I may make you come back and watch Onward. Who knows? There is a lot of, again, like I said, sort of fish out of water humor. Whenever we go into a different environment, they always kind of make little jokes, whether it's Zootopia for Disney or in Cars. And in this one, there was some stuff that I thought was pretty funny. The grandma sleeping with her eyes open, because that's what a fish would do. The show crab instead of like a show dog. The Branzinos next door, like I thought that was pretty funny. And then the whole stars instead of anchovies instead of stars, I thought that was a neat kind of a touch. As a movie, like I think it's a beautiful movie. Would you agree?
Oh my God, the animation was nuts. I was getting real worked up over his shirt, Luca's shirt with the texture on it. Amazing.
Well, and the other thing about it is that, you know, you've got the scales of the boys, and then you've got like the Italian cityscape of Portorosso, which is, I think, phenomenal. So, and then also there's a lot of water, and water is not easy to animate. So like when he's underwater and they show that kind of, you know, the fogginess of it, that's kind of a cool thing that they do. I'm totally just, I think as far as beautiful movie, I think this one gets like an A+.
I would agree. It was very visually appealing.
Yeah. So here's the scene in Portorosso with the boys on the bike and coming down with the villain. The villain, I feel like they did a really good job of the villain. He reminds me a lot of. Did you see Spider-Man: Homecoming?
Yes, I did.
The guy who plays Flash Thompson, where it's kind of like he's a little dorky, but he's just brutally bully. I feel like you do this to me a lot, the whole bullying thing. So
a little bit.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting when they make him kind of like this squirrely, like nobody really likes him sort of a situation, but at the same time, he is a formidable bully.
He is, and I also am enjoying the fact that it's kind of breaking the stereotypical bully stereotype. Like he's kind of a dork, and he's still a jerk, and you can totally be a dork and a jerk both. And he's got the sad little mustache. That's my favorite part.
Which one are you calling me, a dork or a jerk right now?
Let's go with dork.
Love it. So when the boys get together, they decide they want a Vespa. More than anything else in the whole world, they want a Vespa. And, I mean, who doesn't? I wanted a Honda Elite. I feel like that was the name of it. It was like also a scooter that I felt like, oh, I'm 15 years old. I could drive that. That's great. So don't judge me. Don't judge my decisions. the Honda made a scooter. I thought it was called the Honda Elite. I'm not sure. I'll have to Google that.
We'll have to see that.
Yeah, yeah, it's the Honda Elite. I mean, it's no Vespa, that's for sure.
You'd rather have the Vespa.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't rather have a Vespa? Here's a picture of it, though. I mean, come on, look at that bad boy. Look at that bad boy. Can you just imagine me tooling around in that one? Poof! I'd have gotten so many women. It would have been fantastic. Right? Exactly. So, it's one of those things when I look at, at the storyline and they've got this is the thing they want in their life. And so they've found each other. They've decided that they're going to run away to Portorosso, to this human world, and fit in. Of course, Luca is just like fresh out of the water. He's very scared. He doesn't want to do it. But Alberto has this kind of like unearned confidence about himself where he's just ready to jump into any situation because he has told the voice in his head to be quiet. Do you have voices in your head, Blair? And do you tell them to silence?
Constantly, but I don't tell them to silence.
No, you just say bring it. You just are like, yeah. You feed into the fear that they give you and you just don't do anything.
I do. I think I maybe should take a lesson from the movie.
I feel like I've seen situations that I won't call you out on tonight that where you said Silenzio Bruno to the voice in your head and you put on a wristband and did something you shouldn't have. So it's all good. But when they go to to Portorosso, which again is very beautiful, little Italian city on the sea. They find out that everybody there hates sea monsters, and their basic livelihood is fish. Obviously, being on the ocean or on the water, so they feel very uncomfortable at all times about being discovered, which is an interesting plot device. Is you've kind of gone into the belly of the beast here, and you don't want to be found out. And they run into the bully, and then they run into to Julia, who basically comes in and saves them, and she's just a firecracker, and she's confident, and she wants to she wants to help them out and be their friend. And in this process, they find out that there's this thing called the Portorosso Cup, and it's a race, and if they win it, they can get money, and money buys you Vespa. That's what you want, and money buys you Vespa. So, they go in, and that now becomes the new sort of like plot, is that to get to the end result, which is the Vespa, now they're going to have to train for this race. She takes them in and convinces her dad to take in two strange little boys. That's interesting.
He really doesn't even hesitate.
No.
Like for a moment, but I mean, he's just like, yeah, sure, you can stay in the tree in my backyard. That's chill.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that this is about a 90-minute movie, and it's about the first 30 minutes that are all taking place in the water, getting to Portorosso. And then, you've got the 30 minutes where they're training to be, to win this race, and that's cool. And then you get the last 30 is where they, get found out, and then, third act. So I think it's really kind of paced well, this movie. I think it happens very quickly. I think it's a good layout of a movie. Let's talk about her dad for a second, though, because here's the thing that kind of bothers me is that the director, who I think did an amazing job with this movie. The director, Enrico Casarosa, also directed a short for Pixar called La Luna. Have you ever seen that one?
Actually, I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah, again, great pick here.
Behind.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll get you all caught up. So here's the dad.
He's my favorite character.
Yeah, so that's the dad. But then in
He looks a lot like the cat.
He what?
He looks a lot like his cat. I didn't think about that until I looked at that picture. He looks a lot like the cat.
Here's the dad from La Luna.
Oh, it's the same dad.
Right. Only this
the same. And he has the same hat. He puts on that exact same hat at one point when he's walking out the door. When he goes looking for Alberto.
Yeah. I'm going to the wrong thing here. Anyway, so yeah, it's the same thing. The other thing that I found interesting from an animation standpoint was the animation is a little different from your typical your typical Pixar movie. Because a typical Pixar movie has, I don't know, that has a look, I feel like. And this one, and then also say maybe The Incredibles a little bit, and then definitely Brave, all have they have a slightly different look. But one of the things in this one with Alberto specifically is, have you ever seen a stop action animation called Wallace and Gromit?
Of course.
You have. Okay.
Yes.
So
Classic.
I feel like the Nick Park animation from Wallace and Gromit, I feel like I see a lot of that. Yeah.
Specifically Alberto's mouth. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's Alberto hanging out, and then here's Wallace and Gromit, and it's a little. It's not exactly the same, but there's something about it that just makes me feel like, okay, this is, it's very similar, right?
Honestly, I'm glad that you brought that up, because like the whole time I was watching it, I was like where have I, like, this mouth is very familiar. The teeth and the whole look.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just, I mean, I think from an animation standpoint, it's a great layout, and then from a story point, like I said, I think it paces very well. But again, I feel like it's missing something, and I don't really know how to put my finger on that. That it's missing something, because it seems to have all the elements that you need. I know that going into the chat, some people were talking about loving the score. It's a very, it's got that very kind of authentic Italian, Ahmed Olive Garden background music. I mean, it really sounded good. And again, this is supposed to be taking place in 1950s, which I didn't know when I first started watching this. But it makes sense the way that everybody's dressed and all that. It's really neat.
Do you think it's missing a love interest? Is that what's not there?
Okay, so let's talk about this for a second, because I feel like, hang on with me. I feel like they're just kids. I'm not really sure what the age is, but we do know that the Portorosso Cup cutoff is 16, and that Ercole has broken that rule, and so he's older. So the kids have to be somewhere, I would assume, between what?
I would estimate them at like 14. 13 maybe?
13
She was learning pretty in-depth information about the solar system, which makes me put her a little bit older.
Okay. So, and again, I'm not trying to put things that aren't there, and they're young kids, but at the same time, it feels like that they've got three very interesting relationships, and so I want to. I don't know. Is Alberto just a friend? Is he an older brother, or is there kind of like a romantic tie there?
See, I was kind of getting those vibes, because he gets real jealous when Luca starts hanging out with Julia, and I mean, I'm sure part of that is because he's been living alone on this island and he was abandoned by his father, and he probably has a lot of deep-seated loneliness. Yeah, he was excited to have a friend, but I mean, he's drawing pictures of the two of them spending their lives together and driving into the sunset on this Vespa together, and I feel like there might have been a little bit of a romantic undertone.
Well, and they have a very emotional parting at the train station at the end.
They do. He literally is running after the train. I mean,
yeah.
It's classic.
And again, could be a big brother situation, could be a best friend situation, but the whole thing feels awkward, and they're going to miss each other and all that stuff. It just, and again, doesn't have to exist. It does not have to exist, but that was interesting to me. And then at the same time, the Julia, Luca situation, it seems like maybe that there was maybe a little spark there. She was very excited to show him all of these things, and she kind of singled him out. It wasn't Luca and Alberto. It was just specifically Luca.
Yes, that's true. She did definitely lean towards Luca. I don't know if I feel like their relationship to me seemed mostly platonic. I just didn't. I mean, they definitely were fast friends, but I don't know if I read into that spark really with them.
Yeah. And again, I'm just throwing that out there. It doesn't need to exist in this world, but it is just an interesting, relationship. Because like I said from the beginning, there's not a lot of just friendship movies like this that are out there. Because a lot of times, as you said, something usually blossoms into some sort of relationship, especially in some sort of a Disney Pixar movie. Now, modern day movies, it's been much less. Like there's been much less need for that, which has been probably pretty refreshing to be able to just take a movie at face value.
That's the exact same word. It is refreshing.
Yeah. So let's talk about things that are definitely there and Easter eggs. And so I was looking at some of the things in this movie. One of the things, and I don't know that you would be picking these things out, but I figured I would point them out. As one of them is, as Luca and Julia are hanging out in her bedroom, you can see this Donald Duck, and it's not like an official really Donald Duck, but that's got to be Donald. I mean, it's the blue hat.
Definitely Donald.
Yeah, it's the blue shirt. So I think that's a neat thing to put in there. The other thing is, usually in Pixar movies, there are three things. Like I'm telling you, Blair, you're the best when it comes to Pixar movies. But one of them is the Caltech classroom where they all learned animation is A113, and they try to hide that in most movies. This wasn't really hidden all that much. They kind of sort of stopped and focused on this ticket when he handed the ticket that they had purchased to Luca. So I mean, there's the A113 right there for everybody to see. That one, okay, check, that's in there. Second thing that's usually in a Pixar movie is that there's usually a Pixar Pizza Planet truck. This is apparently considered to be the Pizza Planet truck, the Italian version of the Pizza Planet truck. So
that green thing in the background? Oh, I guess it does have the thing on the roof.
Because you see the rocket on the roof, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that.
And it's it's during the chase scene. I know at this point you're probably very afraid for Luca and Alberto as this kid is running through the streets with a harpoon to chase after them. So you were probably more worried about the peril they were involved with than anything else. The last thing we usually see in a Pixar movie is the Pixar ball with the star on it. And that is briefly seen on this rooftop as they're going through the city riding on their bikes. So I like the fact that without really kind of messing up the aesthetic of this movie, they were able to place those things around so that we can see them. So I thought that was interesting. The one thing that they didn't do is John Ratzenberger has been the kind of lucky charm for Pixar since Toy Story in 1995 when he played Ham, and then he played P.T. Flea in A Bug's Life, and so he's been in all the movies. The first 22 movies he was in. In Soul, apparently they cut him out, which was the 23rd, and then they put his likeness in, and in this one it was the first one he wasn't in. Does that make you sad, Blair?
That does make me sad.
Okay. Disappointed. Yeah, I figured it would. I didn't want to bring you down, but I figured it would. So, so because you've done so well so far, let me ask you a couple trivia questions. And basically the way that the trivia questions come, and we'll see how you do here, is just how much you were paying attention during this movie. Because that's what I do, is I'm watching the movie and I go, you know what, that'd be a good thing to ask somebody. So, I feel like the people in chat will be able to answer some of these. So, Sleek Animation Wolf said that is a Lindsay Donald that was made in the 1950s. Very cool. Okay, so here we go. You ready?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
I still think I probably should have gone Pixar movie or not Pixar movie, but we're good. When Luca decides he's going to go and spend more time with Alberto, but he doesn't want anybody to know that he's away, he makes sort of a scarecrow shepherd for his fish. What's the name of the scarecrow shepherd that he makes?
Oh my God. Do not remember.
Not even a guess.
I can't. I'm not even going to guess. I'm not even going to guess. Could not tell you.
Smooka.
Smuka would not in a
Yeah.
million years.
Like, he's not Luca, he's Smuka. Like,
Yeah.
seems like something that he made up. But the funny thing is that when I heard that, I was like, am I hearing that correctly? And I put on the subtitles, and they spelled it Smuka, whereas Luca's name is spelled Luca. So I thought that was interesting that his his evil doppelganger is called Smuka with a K. Um, when he's been spending too much time on the surface, his grandmother covers for him by saying she sent him to find what?
Um,
Ooh,
was it
do you know?
sea cucumbers?
Boom. Boom. Yes, absolutely. There you go. That's a good one. Okay. I don't think you're going to know this one at all, but I just felt like I needed to ask this one. When he finds the alarm clock, what time does the alarm clock say?
uh,
I'll wait. No, I'm just kidding.
I do not know.
11:40. There's no reason
That's
in
very
the world you should know that,
that is
but I
okay.
just, yeah, no, it doesn't. And here's one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I feel like you could know this one.
Okay.
What color are Alberto's eyes?
They're green. There's a scene where they're like having a moment together, and I remember thinking like, oh man, like he's got some pretty green eyes.
Yeah. Yep, that is exactly right. Okay, so you did pretty well with that one. That wasn't
I
too
did
difficult.
60%. Is that a
Yep.
passing grade?
That is a passing grade. Yeah, that is what it. I mean, you got everything but the clock time, right? I mean, actually 2 of 2, so
I
50%.
got
It's fine. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, but you know what? Sometime I'm gonna have to have you back, and I'm gonna have you answer: is it Pixar or is it something else?
I'm gonna have
So
to study.
that's fine. We kind of skipped around the storyline a little bit, but I kind of want to focus back on and I always mispronounce his name, but I think it's Urkel, which reminds me of Urkel, but our villain in this one. Because again, he seems pretty innocent as a villain, basically, because we've kind of talked about he's sort of a dork. But I don't know that I've ever seen in an animated movie a bully actually gut punch another character. Like, that was pretty intense, wasn't it?
Dude, he does punch him. I remember, and he like fully shoves Luca onto the ground, like fully just shoves him over. He actually does kind of go in hard. I mean, he also does like chase them with like a harpoon and stuff later, but yeah,
Yeah.
actually he goes in pretty hard on him.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's scary enough. And it is a scary moment because, Luca's scared. The bullies have kind of pulled him aside, and Alberto is just not stopping, and they gets the gut punch. And then Luca pulls out a harpoon to shove in his face. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna let you go this time." And then later, when he's chasing him through the streets, once the rain comes, and the boys are found out to be sea monsters, he's throwing a harpoon through the streets at the kids. I mean, this is like mortal peril for them. And he does it
Yeah.
earlier too, when when Alberto's in the water to prove his point to Luca that they see them as monsters and that they'll never fit in. When he does that and they start to throw that harpoon, for a minute, the first time I saw it, I was like, what are we doing here? Like, I mean, it's kind of intense, no?
It is, but like the whole town's that way. I feel like it's not just the bully, like that is the environment he grew up. I mean, they show up to the town and there's posters of like harpoons going through sea monsters. Like that's like their whole shtick is like, let's kill sea monsters. Like they're all a little violent there.
Yeah. Phil M in chat said we forgetting the atrocities that Sid committed in Toy Story. No, I mean Sid's a really good
Sid didn't,
bully.
he didn't know that the toys were sentient though, right? Like who hasn't popped a head off of a Barbie? Just me.
Blair, do you have something you want to talk about? This is a
No.
safe space. And then Chief Leaf in chat is bringing up the fact that Lotso, like, you know, in Toy Story 3, Lotso, that's a pretty intense scene too. I agree with that one. You know, him deciding to throw the guys into the trash and them getting thrown into the incinerator and almost getting just burned up. That was a pretty intense scene. I agree.
That was. He didn't have the brute force of like shoving somebody onto the cobblestones like in Luca, but honestly, yeah, Lotso is the worst villain for me. I think he's definitely the most threatening villain there is, Pixar wise. Actually,
Yeah.
you know, maybe for any movie, he's shady.
Now, see, no, you've gone too far there, I think. Any movie. You know what else I was going to ask you trivia wise, because I want to talk about the cast a little bit, is his mom and dad. Do you remember their names?
I remember who their voice actors were, but actually I don't remember the names of the mom and dad.
Yeah, it's very quick. They call each other their respective names about 2 or 3 times during the movie. It's Daniela is the mom and Lorenzo is the dad.
I do remember Lorenzo.
So I find it interesting that there is a lot of there are a lot of, you know, Italian names, etc. But none of these actors I don't think are Italian. I mean, Jim Gaffigan, I'm pretty sure is as
like
Irish as it gets.
Least Italian person you could possibly cast.
Right, right, exactly. But I do love him in a voice role because I do think he has a very unique voice, and him as the dad, I think actually it sort of masks his natural voice in doing this because he does kind of come off as a very, I mean, he is a dad, he's got like 100 kids, I think, but he, you know, I think this is really neat having him as a voice in a movie. Maya Rudolph, as the mom, I found it interesting because she plays Cass in Big Hero 6. So, you know, the fact that she's doing more than one, like, kind of big-time animated movie, I think is interesting. And then Jacob Tremblay as Luca. Are you a fan of Jacob Tremblay?
I honestly don't have strong feelings about him one way or the other. I can't say I'm super duper familiar with his work.
I believe Room was his first big one with Brie Larson,
Yeah.
like the one that he kind of got noticed for, and then Wonder was a big movie for him. So I find it's kind of cool that he would do, you know, the whole Luca thing. He was also in a movie called Good Boys, which if you ever get the chance to see it, it's really interesting about these 3 kids who just are the worst. You know, so that's my thing there. And then the Uncle Ugo. I don't know if you know this or not, or if you paid attention to this or not, but Sacha Baron Cohen
Really?
as Uncle Ugo, yeah, the one where they had to punch him in the heart.
He could do any role. I'm
Right?
obsessed with Shasta. He could do anything. He could literally do anything.
Our radio friends have worn me thin on Borat because I can't even tell you how many of them would walk up and go, "My wife." I mean, nope, nope. But his role in Talladega Nights was fantastic.
Best role. That's his
Yeah.
best role.
His role as landing Isla Fisher as his wife, that was a pretty big get for him. But in this one, you know, what I was reading about was that apparently he had, I don't know if you stayed to see the post-credit scene, but it's more Uncle Ugo.
It is.
So he's, I guess, talking to Giuseppe, you know, the best of the fish. But when apparently they had so much like good kind of riffing and improv from Sacha Baron Cohen that they wanted to continue that by doing more of it in the post credits. So I mean that's kind of fun because it is really random that he's there. Like you didn't need that character to like be threatening to send Luca to the deep. So I mean, I think it does kind of pay off a little bit that he's there.
You always need more Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yeah, and then the Julia and Urkel, I don't think really they don't have a long IMDb. So, you know, I think that those are kind of the big stars of this movie. But again, no John Ratzenberger, which I think Tony said in the chat, like that was the, you know, the downfall of Pixar. That's where we screwed up. No, it wasn't Cars 2 or Cars 3. No, it wasn't The Good Dinosaur. It was when we let John Ratzenberger go. So, this, like I said, this dropped on Disney Plus, and it didn't really have like a true theatrical release. And I still don't get like how they decided to do all that. I know that COVID, I don't know if they had COVID where you were, Blair, but COVID was a thing. Um,
They did.
yeah, okay, cool. And they dropped Soul because they started running into these issues with, well, we've got to release this movie, and we're running out of windows to release it in, and we don't know what the world's going to look like. So they released Soul on Christmas Day of 2020, and then they released Luca in 2021, and then they released Turning Red. All of them direct. And the first movie that they came back to the theaters with was Lightyear, which had a so-so box office. So it'll be interesting to see when the Elementals come out this year, if Pixar is back on top finally. And also they've got Elio and Inside Out both coming out in 2024. So they've got, these all got introduced at D23 Expo. It's a pretty good slate, I think. I feel like they've got some opportunities here, but we'll see how it all plays out. That said, a lot of times when we're talking on this channel, because a lot of our viewers are huge parks fans, I always talk about, well, what were the implications for this into the parks? There really weren't many. There was the DVC does a scavenger hunt through the parks, and if you did the one in Epcot, you got a bonus Luca button. I feel like that in Italy, and a lot of people hate when they take intellectual property and they smack shit into Epcot Center or Epcot. They just are like, why would you do that? But Italy is made for a Portorosso. Like, I would love there to be a Portorosso experience of some sort in the Italy Pavilion at Epcot. So I don't know, Blair, if you have some connections, you can make that happen. That'd be great.
I'll see if I can pull some strings. I feel like that would make a lot of sense because the pasta was a pretty memorable plot point in there. So I'll see what I can do.
Okay, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Were there anything that we missed along the way that you looked at and you went, "Hey, I'd really like to talk about this tonight"? Like that's something that means something to me. And again, like I told you, I feel like there was something missing. Can't really quite put my finger on it because again, the formula is there. But for you, as watching it for the very first time, like, did you look at it and say, "Hey, you know what? I like this. I don't like that. This reminds me of another movie that I need to go back and watch"?
I overall really, really enjoyed it. But I did feel like there was sort of like a lackluster payoff at the end and the, happy moment post climax after, they realize that they're sea monsters and everybody's in a circle around them. And then, the dad comes and he's like, it's cool. Like, they won. And suddenly everybody's like, all right, like, that's fine. Like, we're cool with sea monsters, even though they've, for generations, presumably, have been trying to kill any sea monster they see. And it's pretty sudden that they kind of are just like, all right, we don't hate sea monsters anymore. So,
I mean, that's a great point. Yeah. That's a great point. Like in our society, it takes us a long time, it seems like, to start to accept change or differences, right? And especially in 1950 Italy, that does seem like it would be a big stretch for them to all of a sudden say, "Hey, you know what? Come here, let me give you a big sea monster hug." But I mean, as you watch the credits in the end, they have a lot of little sketches that they do of maybe what would have happened after the train, where Luca does get to, to Julia's mom's house and hangs out with her, and they get to be friends. And then he goes to school, and the kids in school find out because he's got his hand in a fishbowl that he's a sea monster, but they seem to be okay with it. And then they cut back to Alberto, and he's apparently a lifeguard back in Portorosso with the little kids. And so I mean, that's the story we want. That's the happy ending we want. But the reality of it is, it probably wouldn't be that easy. Just like I was talking about how quickly he learned to walk and how quickly he learned to ride a bike. I mean, again, not to call out my daughter on this one, but she's way past her prime in learning to ride a bike, because I never really pushed her as hard as I should have. That's all on me. If she found out she could win a Vespa, that may change everything.
She'd be doing laps around you.
Yeah. The one other thing I wanted to talk about is I can suspend disbelief at any time for anything. Superman can fly. You just need to you need to explain it to me a little bit why I should buy into this, and then be consistent about it. I don't know that they were consistent about when they changed,
Mm.
because there
It
was
was
like,
really like they would just like wipe their face real quick, and like suddenly they were dry enough to not be a sea monster anymore.
yeah, like when he came out of the ocean, when they had done the Portorosso Cup, and he had done phase one, where he was in the dive suit, and the dive suit filled with water. He climbed out and then almost immediately up, and he's sitting at the table completely, human again. Same thing with when they cry, or when they're eating wet pasta with their hands. Like, why didn't that do anything?
That's a good point.
I try to make them.
Yeah, how much water does it need to be? A sauce clearly doesn't count.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Maybe
mean,
it's
again,
pure water. It can't just be something with water in it.
I will suspend disbelief, but you need to be consistent with the rules, and I don't think that they were very consistent with the rules. So,
That'd be
it's
true.
just that's just a me thing. But anyway, so um, once this movie was over, I was like, okay, what what did I learn from this movie? Because again, like you said, like they forgave them, and they integrated them into the movie very quickly, or into their town very quickly afterwards. And it's like, oh, you're a sea monster. The women throw off their umbrellas. We're sea monsters. Everybody's happy. And like you said, this was a town where they were, they hated sea monsters. So, Luca. I'm going to go ahead and say this: Luca kind of wins in this movie, because he runs away. He's not supposed to, but he runs away. And Alberto helps him, and then he kind of ditches Alberto a little bit for his own. And then at the end, he gets to go off to school, and everybody's happy. I don't know that that's a normal thing. Do you?
I He went to school very quickly. I mean, he it was started as a fleeting thought of like I could go to school, and then his parents track him down, and instead of like dragging him back in the ocean, they're like, "You know what? That sounds like a good idea. Like, why don't you just go ahead and do that?" And he just hops on a train like it's Harry Potter and leaves for who knows how long.
It does
Does
look
he
like the
know?
Hogwarts Express, by
Like,
the way.
is he gonna be able to hop right into eighth, ninth grade, wherever he is? Like, does he know algebra? Like,
It doesn't really seem to matter. Again, you're right. Like, hey, can I go to school? Sure, come on. It's going to cost a little money, so clearly it's a private school. And also, the mom, I find it interesting that they decided that the mom and dad were separated. Like, either they're divorced or whatever, because she spends the summer with her dad and she spends school time with her mom. That they didn't just kill her off. That's a typical cartoon thing to do. It's, let's make this not difficult for the kid, and just tell them, well, why can't she have her mommy? Because her mommy isn't here anymore. So it was
I
interesting
think
that it's a split house.
I think some of that is because the she's like kind of like the weirdo in town, right? Like the bully. Like part of his shtick is he's like, "This is my town. Like I win the races here. Like you're only here in the summer. Like get out of my way." So I think having her have somewhere else to go for the rest of the year, and her only being around in the summer was relevant to her character, which I think is probably part of why she had a mother somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get to the final wrap up here, and again, be prepared. Are you are you prepared to give your final thoughts on this one? Okay. I just again, a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you guys so much for watching tonight. We appreciate you. And again, if you're in Florida, if you're in the East Coast, like in the path of the end, please stay safe. Be smart. Hunker down, and just be well. That's the biggest thing. Secondly, please make sure to subscribe. We got a lot of entertainment to keep you busy here. We have News Tonight, which is our comedy variety show, which will be on WDW and TTV. I believe that they're moving that to Friday night because of the storm. So that's the current plan for that, is my understanding. Stay tuned and we'll let you know how that works out. And then Sunday, we will not have Park Center because it's the 40th anniversary of Epcot this weekend. And hopefully, everything goes smoothly and the parks open up and everybody can celebrate. So that is what's coming next. Next week on Deep in the Plus, I wanted to say we're going to do Hocus Pocus 2 because Hocus Pocus 2 comes out this Friday. So hopefully you guys will join us for Hocus Pocus 2 next Wednesday night. So that's your homework. You got to watch between now and then. Watch Hocus Pocus 2. It's the beginning of spooky season for us. We're going to watch that. We're going to watch Werewolf by Night. We're going to watch Toy Story of Terror. And we're going to watch Maleficent. That's going to be our October. So hopefully you guys will come back and join us for more panelists and more movies. And we'll just, have a good time. So with all that said, Blair, this is your big moment. This is it. The people need to know. We've talked about the movie. We talked about the visuals. We talked about the cast. We talked about all of these things. But the important part is, would you recommend this movie?
I think ultimately it was no Coco. As far as modern day Pixar movies go, I can't give it the #1 slot, but the animation was great. I really enjoyed the story. I loved the characters. I thought the voice actors were great. Overall, I would say yes, I do recommend. I'm going to give it a solid B+.
Wow. I don't know that I'm not prepared to do grades at this point. I will say, though, that I think a lot of people slept on this movie because they probably thought, hey, you know what, it's going straight to Disney+. Maybe they don't have a lot of confidence in it. I thought it was a very charming movie, and like I said, some people end up loving this movie after they've watched it. My daughter is one of them. She watched this movie, and she watches it a lot. I mean, it's a nice little feel-good movie, and I definitely would recommend it. I think it's a beautiful movie. I think that the cast does an incredible job. Like I said, I feel like it's missing something to make it just a wow movie, but that doesn't mean it's not a good movie. So I would highly recommend it for anybody who skipped on it the first time. We didn't get too in-depth into everything here tonight, a little bit different than normal. So I do think that you will still enjoy this movie even if you haven't seen it yet. So hopefully you'll give it a shot. So and then Blair, thanks for being on. I appreciate it and you taking your time and hanging out with me. So
for sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Again, everybody out there, please stay safe, be well, and we will see you next time.